Welcome to the Resolute Warrior Podcast by Resolute Men Ministries, where we equip men to activate a life of authentic character. A resolute warrior is purposefully minded, steadfast in character, a man who walks in humility with an unshakable faith. We interview men who are having an impact in the Christian arena, as well as discussing topics related to men from a biblical perspective. It's about real life with real challenges with real men. And now to today's podcast.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Resolute Warrior Podcast. Today we're going to discuss the topic, the cost of discipleship. We know when we value things in life, there's a cost. We know that if we want to purchase something, it's going to cost us money. If we're going to invest our efforts into something, it's going to cost us time. Sometimes it costs us both. Well, the cost of following Jesus is going to cost us everything, but it's worth it. I think a lot of us have underestimated the cost of following Christ, including myself. We understand that there's a cost involved, but do we truly understand what the value of that cost is? What's required of us? So we're going to dive into scripture today. We're going to read out of Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 35. And here you're gonna see where a large crowd is following Jesus to hear what he's sharing with them in regards to what it means to follow him. So let's dive in. It says, "Now great crowds were traveling with him. So he turned and said to them, 'If anyone wants to come after me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, and children, and yes, his own life, he cannot be my disciple.'" Let's pause there for a moment. What Jesus is saying this, he wanted to get their attention. I know we hear the word hate, but that's not what he's emphasizing here. That's not what he's really driving home. What he's saying is, what do you value more? Do you value your family more than me? Where do you put your hope and trust in more? Is it in yourself or is it in me? So basically what Jesus is doing, he's separating the men from the boys. Are you going to follow me and be all in, or are you just going to say, I want you, Jesus, but can't I just have you like within reach? Because I do want to hold on what I got going on over here. Look, God's called us to love our families. God's even called us to love ourselves, but not to love ourselves and our families to the point that we elevate them higher than him. What's the cost? What's it going to cost us? So that's where we're going to dive in a little bit further and see where Jesus takes us, because I really want us to understand that there is sacrifice in our part. And I think we've kind of been misguided on what that sacrifice truly is. So here we go. Verse 28 says, "For which of you, wanting to build a tower, does not sit down and evaluate the cost?" You calculate it first, right? To see if you have enough money to complete it. Otherwise, if he has laid the foundation and cannot finish it, all the onlookers will just laugh at him, saying, "This man started to build something but wasn't able to finish." So here's the thing. Would you go buy a home without evaluating the cost? What's it going to cost you monthly? Do we have enough money to afford what we're about to purchase? And that's what Jesus is saying. Have you counted the cost of following me? Do you really know what you're saying? Do you know what's really required of you? Because it's going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you inconvenience. I think a lot of us serve out of convenience. I've been guilty of it. But are you willing to serve someone out of inconvenience? Are you willing to set aside your time and saying, "This is what I deserve"? We deserve nothing. We deserve nothing good when it comes to following Jesus. But yet, he gives us what is good because we do follow him. So we see in Matthew 16:24 through 25, Jesus is saying this. He said, "If anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Because whoever seeks to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." So where are we seeking? Are we seeking to save our own lives? Are we willing to sacrifice and surrender at all costs to follow Jesus? What are we seeking? Because that's what Christ is challenging us with today. What are you truly seeking? Is it for self-gain, self-recognition? Or is it for sacrifice into the holy God that he's going to bless you beyond measure? You see, when we come to Christ, the old has been put away and the new has come. That means the old life is gone, the new life is here. That's what it means to follow Christ. It means you have surrendered the old life. That means your old ways, your old habits, your old desires, your old wants are gone. They're gone. And then there's a new desire. There's a softening of the heart that leads us to something more eternal. Something eternal. You know, there's things that hold us back from that. It could be anger. Our old life, we dealt with anger and it's trying to resurface and it kicks back up. But do we knock it down? Do we surrender it and leave it at the cross? Do we take it captive when that old nature tries to come back in? It could be lust. There could be desires. Now, lust comes in many forms. It could be of the flesh. It could be materialistic. Do we take that thought captive and not let the old nature creep back in? That doesn't mean that we're not going to have these struggles anymore. Sometimes they are gone. Sometimes they're removed. They're gone. But Satan knows that when you strive to chase after something greater in Jesus Christ, that he tries to flare up those old desires again. But do we take them captive? Do we attack it with the word? Do we attack it with prayer? Do we attack it with fasting? All this I'm sharing with you today, I'm preaching to myself, by the way. Do we go after it? Because faith without works is dead. We learned that in James chapter 2. Faith without works is dead. If we are not active within our faith, it's useless. We have to take action. So let's go on further. He says here in Scripture, diving into verse 31, he says, "Or what king goes to war against another king and will not sit down and decide if he's able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If not, while the other is still far off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. In the same way, therefore, every one of you who does not say goodbye to his old possessions cannot be my disciple." So here he goes. Are you willing to go to battle without counting the cost? Like, are you prepared is what he's saying. Have you set a readiness plan in place? Do you understand what's about to come? Or are you just kind of winging it? And that's what Jesus is saying. You got to understand the cost that's involved here. And he says, if anyone can't say goodbye to all his possessions, he's not worthy to be my disciple. Now I want to make something clear. We all have possessions. We all have things of value. If you own a house, it's a possession. If you own a car, it's a possession. There's things that we have. It's okay to have these things as long as they don't have you. That's what God's saying here. Are you willing, though, to leave that all behind if God were to call you into the mission field? I'm not saying he's doing that. Maybe he is. Are you willing to set it aside and move forward? That's what God's saying. And we also learned that in Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21, where it says, "Do not lay for yourselves treasures here on earth where moth, rust, and thieves can break in and steal, but lay for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth, rust, or thieves can break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." What's the nature of your heart? What's your heart telling you? Are you willing to surrender and sacrifice and leave it all behind? That's what God's calling us. Are you willing to leave it all behind to follow me? That's the nature of the cross. That's what Jesus did for us. He died on the cross, left it all out there, left it all behind. He took upon sin on himself so that we can have that freedom in him to those who believe. Now, to believe is not enough. I think we misinterpret what it means to believe God, because to believe is more than just saying, hey, I believe in God with our words. It has to be activated. And that's what believe means, to be living in. To be living in means you're moving forward, taking action. We also read in James where the demons believed, but they shuddered, right? But they weren't following Christ. It's not enough to believe. Our actions have to follow. Our actions speak louder than words. We hear that all the time. Then he goes on to say, as we close that, says, now salt is good, but if salt should lose its taste, how will it be made salty? It isn't fit for the soil or for the manure pile. They throw it out. Anyone who has ears to hear should listen. So what we understand here, salt does lose its flavor if it's not being used properly. So it's almost like if we're saying we're Christ followers and we just sit back and do nothing, we're going to lose our flavor, what it means to speak life into someone. Someone may had hope in what they thought they saw in us in regards of being a genuine Christ follower, but then they see us, well, that guy's back doing what he used to do. That guy, his language doesn't really back that up. It loses its zeal. It loses its flavor. It loses its power. So that's what I want to leave with you guys today is evaluate yourselves as I'm going to evaluate myself. Am I truly a disciple of Christ? 80% of this country says they're Christian. But are they really? Are they disciples of Christ? Just because you go to church, just because you said some prayer, doesn't fully make you a disciple follower. It requires a cost, it requires sacrifice, and it requires a commitment. All right? So take care, and God bless.
You can connect with Resolute Men on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Men, stay focused and determined. Fight the good fight. Live for something bigger than yourself. And be a resolute warrior.